waiting for the rain out here. I noticed that the redneck rain gauge is gone. Did they patch the roof? I noticed I can't see blue sky through the hole, so maybe they put some duct tape over that roof spot. It's warm out here. The fish survived the freeze. So we're doing good. We got the coffee on. It isn't Temple coffee, but it's Huth coffee. Yeah, Huth special coffee. So Wikiman and I, this is Lou Benninger, we're here, and we're sitting on Mount Huth today, wondering if we're going to have to put our equipment into four-wheel drive and get the snowshoes out to make it here. They say we're going to have weather all week. I thought, thank you, Jesus. We're going to fill up that Oroville Dam and that Bullards Bar Dam and have some water to drink. I was telling the guys in the Yuba County Jail, I said, you need to pray for rain. If you want to continue drinking water, somebody needs to contribute, get some skin in the game. So we're here for 3 hours today till noon. And this isn't pre-recorded, it's live. So if you want to dial us up, you can. Or whatever term you want to use. I still use dial because I started with the rotary model back in the day. We just finished tip training, and I was talking along, and I used the term phone book, and all the young people in the deal said they've never heard of a phone book. What's a phone book? And then I suggested that sometimes GPS doesn't work for finding the right address when we get sent to a trauma call. And I said some of us old schoolers actually have a map, and some of them just said, what's a map? Who has those things anymore? So here we are. You can dial us up at 530-742-5555 if you want to talk at us. This is a pro-choice program, so sometimes we need to abort calls that aren't convenient or I think going to squelch my career. So sometimes Wikiman just take your message and pass it on. Sometimes you call and you want to talk about a topic that I'm not interested in, so it's not convenient to me, or you call too late. You think about it for an hour, so then you call and want me to go back to that old topic, and I've moved on in my life. So 530-742-5555, if you're out there somewhere and you stumbled across this program and you're having a hard time tuning it in because our power ain't what it used to be. But now we got a guy in the house, Mike, who's going to actually get our power up, and where you can you'll have to turn the radio down. So if it's scratchy out there, you can go on to our website at kmycradio.com, kmycradio.com, and click on the Listen Live button. And if the streaming is working, if there aren't too many black widows in the system that have goofed us up, or some tweaker hasn't messed with the system out here, stealing all the copper off the building, you can listen to it there. Or if you just get totally frustrated and you think, I haven't got time for this, you want to listen to it later, you can go to One Eye Blind Media on YouTube. One Eye Blind Media. And you can tap into that channel and look for Live with Lou and click on whatever program you want, whatever date you want, and listen to your heart's desire. It is a bit edited. It's different than we have here because some of what we play here can't be played on YouTube because of copyright limitations. So it's just a little different. But I hear people every week now saying, hey, I like that YouTube thing because I can't listen on Saturdays because my wife or my husband's got me doing all these projects and, I can't hear it. So anyway, that's a scoop from here. That's the introduction. This is the Patriot 1410 AM. So in case other people are listening to hold us to the legality rules, there you have it. I'm going to try to not get us sued today. That's my goal. One of my goals. The big chief told me, Lou, take it easy. So I'm drinking the Mount Huth coffee out here. But last week we had Temple coffee. And the millennials claim Temple Coffee is the best coffee in the world. And they claim that the only place to get it in the Yuba Sutter area is over at the Sunflower, I call it the Natural Food Store, but they actually call it the Sunflower Market in Delhi. It's right there where they're doing all the bridge construction. Is it amazing to watch the construction of that Fifth Street Bridge? I think it's fascinating. I want to get close and look at it, but now they're like tearing apart everything and like get involved in all kinds of traffic over there. But we had some, Wiki Man, he brought in a couple cups of Temple Coffee the other day, and I thought, this is pretty good stuff, huh? Right. What are you drinking today? Circle K? Is that good coffee? Yeah. Circle K's okay? Yeah. Well, I went cheap, and I'm drinking the House Blend out here. And that's Mr. Tom Huth provided that for us free of charge. The guy takes good care of us. We can have all the almonds, salted almonds we can eat, and coffee, and we could even have some water and use the toilet when the water's on out here. So Wiki Man not only runs the board, but he also takes care of the plumbing and electrical downfalls out here. And now we got Mike that take care of it, keep us on the air. So, but if you really like coffee, you've never tried this Temple Coffee, the millennials of town think us old folks don't know what coffee really tastes like, because Temple Coffee is grown by people that aren't abused around the world, and it's fair trade, and they have better farming practices, and they love those beans. They take better care of the beans, and they roast them better. And it is good. I liked it. I've had an iced coffee and then I had a regular coffee, and they're both good. So if you want to check it out, you can pop in there at the Sunflower, get a sandwich, slam down on one of those great sandwiches or soups, and then you can also knock back a cup of Temple Coffee and all flavors, all stuff. It doesn't have any unhealthy ingredients. In fact, I was just reading, I did a class on food and nutrition in at the jail, and where all my research said that coffee actually prevents Alzheimer's and all kinds of, it prevents diabetes, and coffee is like, all of a sudden, all these scientists think coffee is really good for you. And I thought, it's nice when you've done something all your life, and now they're saying you did the right thing. Usually I've done something all my life, and they said, you just did the wrong thing, dude. So anyway, I saw this photo, and I just thought, this is really sad, but it sort of captures the predicament we have in the United States today. And a lot of people they're ignorant. Some people say stupid. And a young girl, pretty young girl, nicely dressed, is standing at a protest, a millennial girl, and she has a sign that obviously she just hand did. It's kind of a blue placard duct taped onto this stick, and it says, "Stop killing alligators to make Gatorade." Now, I thought, I've seen a lot of things, but this woman, and she looks like somebody I'd like to hang out with, but I thought, this woman, there's been sort of a mishap in her background. I don't know whether she was dropped as a baby or she didn't get any breast milk. She was on that formula for all her years, but somehow she's got a kink in her DNA. And in fact, she didn't even spell Gatorade right. It's A-I-D. I think Gatorade is A-D-E, but she got Gatorade. In other words, stop killing alligators to make your Gatorade. Well, I'm sure she loves animals, but I don't know why. I know they make alligator. I think does Tomas have alligator boots? I don't know. Somebody has alligator skin boots. Now, I don't know what they'd kill an alligator for unless he was trying to eat somebody, but I don't think they make Gatorade out of it, So anyway, there you have it. The other thing I saw, which I thought was great, is it was a comment on the Academy Awards, which I haven't had a television since 1987, so I've missed out on Academy Awards, and I don't really think I missed anything, but it said, this one comment said, "Tonight the Hollywood elite will take time out from raping each other to lecture you about gun control while their armed security details stand close by backstage. Just a thought, you know. I tell you, that's one perverted bunch of people down there. You know, the Bible says we're all sinners, and we all got a gnarly side. In fact, I was telling I have a couple teenagers coming through this TIP training. We're doing trauma intervention training, where we go out on 911 calls with the law enforcement stuff. So one of the fathers of one of the teens, when I mentioned they were going to have a mentor to double check that they caught everything to the training, a mentor just to meet with them once or twice. And he said, well, hey, are these mentors background checked? And I thought, and I told him, I said, yeah, everybody in TIP is background checked by law enforcement and Department of Justice and stuff. But I said, even though you have a clean background doesn't mean there's a bad thing can happen, because people have gnarly stuff lurking in their heart that they're scrambling and fighting against all the time. So you can have a pedophile living next door that has no record, but he's still a pedophile, right? So I just said, but, I tried to comfort this father who was just trying to cover all the bases of parenting. Well, I hope you're having a good day. And by the way, if you're new to this, we're out here in Yuba County. That's up here in the state of Jefferson, what we hope to be the state of Jefferson. One of 58 counties. It's one of the poorer counties around, but it doesn't have to be, but it's just got a lot of poor leadership. And when you have, like my friend Dave Bryan always says, everything rises and falls on the quality of leadership you have. So it's interesting. Government people think that somehow they create the economy that they have nothing to do with except ruining. So they think sometimes they can like they have these jobs they describe as community development. What that means is taking your tax money from you and then going out and creating programs, right? It doesn't have anything to do with jobs. Remember Obama said we have these shovel-ready jobs. He actually had no idea what he was even really saying. He's never really had a job before himself. And so he had these shovel-ready jobs. He just gave a speech, right? He had no idea. He hadn't seen any paperwork on any jobs. So a lot of the jobs they created, the government tried to create, cost $500,000 a piece. They gave it to these companies who then went bankrupt. And actually the money all went, remember that jobs thing when the economy tanked? And they gave all the money to these organizations. All of it went to fund pensions for unions. Did you know that? Well, that's the facts, whether you want to believe it or not. People think I make up stuff, but actually it's not that hard to do this kind of stuff. You can just find out all this. It's all out there with the technology today, and everything's recorded and either videoed or in the newspapers and magazines, and you don't need to even have a television. Well, I wanted to mention an article because this was written by a guy that has been on the radio here some, and it also happened down where my daughter lives, and her husband is a sheriff's deputy down there, so I watched the news down there in Orange County. And actually we have a trauma intervention program down there, a big program down there. And the title of the article by Chris Street, who writes a lot for Breitbart, the title is 14,000 used needles at Orange County River homeless camps. I don't know whether you've been following this, but they, like Yuba County and Sutter County, they've allowed the homeless. Now, and I say allowed because there have always been people in society that didn't want to fit in. They wanted to stay loaded. By the way, the people that are homeless are not like people with PhDs and 4-year degrees and just had a catastrophe in their life and couldn't pay their rent, so now they're down in they're down in a tent with a laptop searching for jobs on the riverfront. They're not down there with that, with a solar panel pumping their laptop. So for years we've had people that decided, I want to step off this bus called the society we live in, and I don't want to work. I don't want to rent an apartment. I don't want to jump through all those hoops. I just want to sleep wherever I want to sleep. I want to live wherever I want to live, and then complain about society and how bad it is. And I've met a lot of these people because my work for 40 years was working with people in and off the streets, in and out of jail, in and out of hospitals, in and out of everything, in and out of drug rehabs. And so I know a lot of these people. In fact, I had recently, Wikiman, I had one of the ladies that works for law enforcement. She befriended me on Facebook, right? But then she realized that anybody could look at who my friends were, and some of my friends were criminals. So she said, Lou, I don't want my name. I don't want them to know how to get a hold of me, right? So now I had to change my whole Facebook thing. It's just like, because some of my friends are criminals and some of them are like arresting criminals, right? So anyway, I've been working with these people for all these years. So 14,000 used needles at Orange County River homeless camps. Now the only difference between us and Orange County is we have a smaller problem than they do, but we've made the same bad decisions up here. So when you see things that are messed up, when all your taxes are taken from you and given to people, they claim they're going to take care of us, but then you see roads that are all screwed up, parks that are all screwed up. They got people disposing of their waste on your property, whether it's unclaimed debris, like Scott Mitnick says, or whether it's human waste, feces, right? I can't say the other word. Big Kahuna says that's a bad word, and I'll get him sued. So when you see that, then you know that it's a failure of government, because we've always had people that didn't want to play by the rules, right? So I just got this email, and I'm going to read it because it has something to do with this needles thing. Says, because it has something to do with Sutter County supervisors as well. It says, several months ago, the Sutter County supervisors voted unanimously to immediately enforce its no camping ordinance. However, County CAO, that's County Administrative Officer, CAO, Scott Mitnick, apparently decided that the supervisors did not have the authority to order him to proceed with the enforcement. As a result, he instructed Sutter County employees not to enforce the ordinance and to allow the continued pollution and destruction along the Feather River. The fact that Scott Mitnick has a home and family in Ventura County may explain why he has little regard for the health and safety of Sutter County residents or the devastation of one of its most treasured natural resources. He's referring to the river and the land along the river, which is quite beautiful. However, it does not explain why he believes he has the authority to disregard the unanimous decision of the elected county supervisors of Sutter County. Now, I have had a number of talks with people that are fascinated with this phenomenon, is that we elect supervisors to manage our affairs and city council people. Then they abdicate or turn over or become passive and let government bureaucrats do something else that we don't want, that the citizens do not want. And they drag their feet. And instead of the board firing them, I remember when there was a story when Dan Logue, who was an assemblyman for a number of years, but before that he was a supervisor of Andy Vasquez's district in District 1 in Linda. Dan one day was on the board, I think he was chairman, and he got into a discussion with Robert Bendorf, CAO of Yuba County, and he was trying to instruct Robert Bendorf on what to do in a particular topic matter, and Bendorf kept saying, but. And finally, Dan, the story goes, Dan says to Robert Bendorf, Robert, who signed your checks? Who pays your checks? Who hired you? And he said, the Board of Supervisors. And then he said, then do what we told you to do. And that'll be the end of it. So it's interesting to see whether the Sutter County supervisors are going to finally have the government, which would be the bureaucrats that outlast the supervisors. They stay on from, that's the same people that resisted Trump, that are resisting Trump. So you have the sheriff's department people, and you have the county administrator. County administrator isn't elected. He's hired, right? So So what you have here is Orange County found 13,000. They cleaned up. The judge said you got to move all these people got to go, and they forced the county to pay for 500 hotel rooms. Just 500. There's thousands of people down there, right? This is like a city down there. They've moved along the river. They started picking up. I'm going to tell you how many of everything they found. They counted it. 13,950 used hypodermic needles left by evicted homeless people along the Santa Ana River, confirming the public health concerns that led to the camp's removal. In other words, there's all kinds of disease down there, and people are getting hepatitis this, hepatitis that, tuberculosis, all kinds of things. So it took over, this is government, it took over 1 decade, 10 years, more than that, of legal battles for the county of Orange to be able to evict 1,000 campers along the river on February 26th. So I don't know why they didn't put all of them in. Maybe they're doubling up in hotel rooms, but they got to pay. So these people, they claim they had a civil right to camp on any non-private property. Now that would be, they're not supposed to be able to camp on my property, although they use it as a toilet. So if it's government property, they have a right to live there. So they required the county to pay for almost 500 motel rooms per night. Maybe that's where Scott Mitnick got the idea to pay for hotel rooms over in Sutter County at $1,000 a month. We out of time? Wikiman's calling the shots here today. He says we got to let somebody else talk for a couple of minutes, and I'm coming. All right. Well, we're talking about politically correct bull, S-H-I-T, in our counties that causes disaster, causes sickness, and causes death. And then the government pleads, well, it wasn't our fault. We just have to deal with it. And, hey, let's not cry over spilt milk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody in government wants to take responsibility for anything. They just want to point to somebody else. So over a decade of legal battles in the county of Orange led to thousands of people along the Santa Ana River leaving a mess, right? As you are hiring Recology, at least that's who it is in Yuba and Sutter counties, to pick up your unclaimed debris, everybody else that lives out on the street, you think, well, if they want to live there, fine. Yeah, but they leave their unclaimed debris and their feces all around the community for the taxpayers then to have to pay Recology to pick that up as well, or the Yuba County Water Agency. So the Orange County Public Works Department took 3 months to clean up dozens of campsites, maybe 1,000 people. So they kept track of how much they picked up. They picked up 5,279 pounds, not of unclaimed debris, but human feces. I want you to think about that. That's over 2.5 tons. You ever been in a stockyard where they're feeding cattle? You ever drive down I-5 by the Harris stockyard feeding operation there? You can smell it for miles before you get there and then miles afterwards. And they use front-end loaders, big front-end loaders, and big dump trucks to move the manure out of those pens and then fertilize with it. Stockpile it, and then when it's settled down, they use it for fertilizer. So 5,279 pounds of human waste, 404 tons of trash, which isn't much trash. I thought, oh, these guys, maybe they're recycling homeless people down there, because we had more trash ourselves up here in Yuba County. The Yuba County Water Agency, I think, moved more than that. And in 13,950 needles, county health inspectors determined that the area was so hazardous to human health that a 2-mile stretch of the bike trail along the river, because the bike trail along the river was unusable while the homeless were there because it's too dangerous. But a 2-mile stretch of that bike trail will require complete removal from Santa Ana to Anaheim, and about 3 inches of the topsoil is going to have to be scraped off and burned. I want you to hold that thought. Burned. The county will also intend to use an asphalt slurry to seal and recover all bike paths along the edges of the river. Now, you think government what term should I use for this? Incompetence, I think, is the best way, right? Because they've bitten off all this BS liberal baloney, no matter whether they think they're conservative or not, they've been influenced and infected by it. Social justice advocates, of course, and their attorneys argue that the homeless campers are just victims. I wonder, how did my life victimize these people? What did I do? I always wonder, did I do something to you? And the social justice attorneys say that the encampments are not a threat to local communities. Now, I wonder whether old Greg Kelly, his family, thought that when he got beaten to death by a tree limb along the Yuba River. And when the girl he raped, I wonder whether she thought that was not a hazard to her. And then he got murdered. But health officials are warning that campers are a ticking time bomb of infectious disease. Breitbart News reports that California hepatitis A outbreak that began in the San Diego homeless tent cities has spread to the state-wide general population. I wonder how much we have here. I'll have to make a couple calls this week and find out. When I say here, for you that are listening in some of your other counties, I'm talking, when I say here, I usually think of Yuba, Sutter County, because we have twins. The county seats are just a river apart here, Yuba City and Marysville, the county seats of Yuba and Sutter. But I know you over there in Placer and Nevada, Colusa, Butte, all of you are dipping into this station some. So the California Department of Public Health, their most recent reporting found that we're having an average, this isn't a total, this is an average of 350 new cases and 11 deaths per week. Did you know that? You think, where's that on the news? This isn't total for the state since the epidemic began. This is new cases, hepatitis A per week, 350 a week. And 11 deaths a week. You think we haven't got a big problem? And that's why the person sending in the email, why isn't Scott Mitnick enforcing the law and forbidding us to enforce the law in Sutter County to clean up the camps? Because it's a ticking time bomb, according to the Orange County people or the state health department. Now, hepatitis A is not the only problem. In fact, I need to call the health official for Yuba County, Nicole Quick. She's cool, very nice lady. I've had her on the show here talking about drug addiction. That's one of her specialties. I'm going to ask her about some of this. Other infectious disease outbreaks that have started in the homeless encampments include new strains of tuberculosis that are unique to Northern California. Isn't that amazing? Northern California. It's a deadly new strain of streptococcus that killed 3 homeless people in Anchorage, Alaska. But it's down here now. And then there's a Shigella foodborne illness that causes bloody diarrhea, which began in Portland homeless camp. See, it moves because homeless people move. Did you know that? Have you ever noticed some of the because I know a lot of people around here. People that are in pretty good shape and people that are in bad shape. And a lot of the people in my neighborhood I never saw before that are moving through my neighborhood. I've never seen them around town. I thought, I have never seen that person before. I wonder where he's from or she's from. I had a gal sitting on the sidewalk. I came home the other day. She was sitting on my sidewalk playing with a cat, and she had all her gear laying on the sidewalk, just sitting there enjoying the sun and having a time with this. It's the local prostitute cat. She just kind of hangs around and mooches and then has sex and has kittens and then does that whole process over every few months. So anyway, check this out. The American Council on Science and Health warns that homeless camps are especially effective as a breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant infectious diseases that are now responsible for about 23,000 U.S. deaths each year. That's about 2,000 a month, eh? This is the center of disease control. This isn't just like somebody is like giving you a guesstimate so they can get a grant. The American Council on Science and Health warns that homeless camps represent a serious health risk to general populations. That means if you are living in your nice home over there in North Yuba City, $500,000 home, or $500,000, 300,000, 500,000, you can be affected by this. You think, how? My house is nice and clean, but you don't just stay in your house. You like travel around. And then when you go to the grocery store and you grab onto the handle on one of those grocery carts, like out at Walmart. I was out at Walmart yesterday because my phone was acting up. Phone I bought. And I thought, I'm going to have to buy me another landline phone. And I thought, and I watched the lady ahead of me. She grabbed her cart and she grabbed one of them little towels you pull out of the dispenser and she wiped down her handle. And I thought, I wonder if that handle had some of that streptococcus on there. Right? Go out there, buy me a phone, and catch me some hepatitis A right off the Walmart handle right there. So the microbial world thrives. It says that science and health people say the microbial world thrives in a camp squalor. So you would think that, you know, we're spending about $200,000 a year for these health officials, having a doctor that all she or he focuses on is the health of the county. You would think that somebody would do something. But the docs don't have any power, right? They just can, remember Dr. Cassidy was, he was the health official at Yuba County, and the politicians got so pissed off at Doc that they tried to fire him, even though he got a state award for being a top doc in the state. But they thought, we don't care whether there's a top doc or not. We don't want people messing with what we want to do. Right? These politicians that basically don't have any education. I was talking to a city councilman last night, and I said, do you realize on that city council you don't have one person that ever had a business or faced all the government regulations and baloney you guys put people through? I said, do you have any idea what the effect you're having on government? I said, the biggest thing you can do is just dump your regulations and get out of the way and quit trying to make decisions over everybody else's lives. I said, holy mackerel. He's clueless. He's worked for government his whole life. You know, he's retired with a pension that you and I pay, and he never did jack diddly to earn a living and risk any money. I said, do you ever put any... I said, you just got a government check all your life. I said, you never started a business and risked your entire life savings, everything you had. You went home at night. You worked 24 hours a day. You worked, and then at night you worried about working. So this Sutter County resident, he says today, several months ago, the supervisors voted unanimously, and not one thing is done about it to rid the county of homeless camp. They just ignored it. Just flat ignored it. So there you have it. I don't know what you think about that, but that's just what's going on, and it's just an amazing thing to me that these administrators have so much power that where we didn't hire that administrator. I didn't want that administrator. Nobody asked my opinion. And the guy never has, you know, even some of the supervisors, oh, he's a great guy. He actually lives here. I thought, well, thank you, Jesus. He actually lives here. Well, it's like But he never moved his wife to town, never moved his kids to town, and he keeps flying down to Ventura County. I thought, it's just amazing to me. It's like, and we, of course, we pay him enough to do that, right? Pay him enough to do that. Well, I want to talk to you about the shoot. Have you been checking out these shooters and stuff? Have you ever heard anything about all these youngsters and oldsters? Some of them are, like the guy over in Las Vegas that shot up a concert over 20,000 people. He was my age, right? But a lot of these school shooters are youngsters. And I wanted to read you something, or tell you. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm just going to tell you something. There was some research done on the last 26, 27, 28 shooters. And do you know what the common denominator was of all these shooters? They looked at the last 27 deadliest mass shootings in America. And you'd think, well, were they all white supremacists? Were they all Republican? Were they all, what were they? Well, the one common denominator of 26 of 27 males that killed lots of people, maimed lots of people, is that they didn't have a father. No biological father. Now, it's interesting that it's even reported, because the politically correct left pretty much wants to eliminate any kind of biological role models. They want to eliminate moms and dads. So then you can have same sex, and even among homosexual couples, you notice one of them takes on the male role model. You notice that? Yeah, they got the male vibe. They got a little testosterone pumping there. And then you have the other one that's the more passive, the female side. But in spite of that, they want to eliminate they don't want the term mother, father, husband, wife. They want to eliminate all that so we can have all same sex, right? And just go generic, like brand X. So that's why the media never talks about the cultural problems that may have created all these shooters. They don't want to go to the culture and talk to culture, because they think the culture is all right the way it's headed. It's like we got an agenda, and whatever the problems that it creates, like abortion, same-sex marriage, all the stuff, right? We don't attribute any of the problems of society to that, like making fun of faith in God, devotion to God, Christianity. Any other religion will do, but not Christianity. So it's just kind of publicly off limits to go here and talk about this stuff. But the fact is, all the research shows just one of the 27 shooters was raised by his biological father since childhood. Now sometimes kids get pinch hitter fathers, like my dad was my biological father, but he was the stepfather to my half-brother, half-sister, right? So I'm not saying that, well, let me just go on and tell you what this finding was, and just you can put that in your pipe and smoke it. So the research says that there's a direct correlation. Now, this seems obvious to a lot of people, but for some of you out there, it's just going to be new news, because maybe you never thought it and you don't know about the history of these shooters. So there's a direct correlation between boys who grew up with absent fathers and boys who drop out of school, drink alcohol, do drugs, who became delinquent, and who wind up in prison. Now, Dr. Cassidy alerted me to this article because he teaches a class for fathers who need to know about parenting, because a lot of them in jail, he teaches it in jail. I teach different classes. He teaches a father's first class in jail, And he discussed this with the inmates, and they knew the answer because a lot of them been in prison. And they said, what's the most common thing about all prisoners? And the common thing about people in the state prison system is most of them, a high percentage of them, they were not raised by biological fathers. So that's a 96.3% rate of folks that did the shooting. They didn't have biological fathers in their life. And so it doesn't mean that boys raised in fatherless families are likely to become mass shooters. I don't know whether I even need to say that if you ever took a critical thinking course. But it's an affirmation of what we already know, right? Boys need dads, just as daughters need dads too. Children need fathers. They also need mothers. But we have a government system created by the government to create a welfare system where it's mother-focused. So if you get rid of the dads, the government becomes the dad. And because they think, oh, we can do without dad, we just need to give money. In other words, some of my money is taken to support people up and down the street. Like I got some people down the street that do drugs, and one of them overdosed the other day, and she died. She's a 36-year-old woman, had a 4-year-old boy. Well, I was supporting her family, right? Because she was doing drugs, and so part of my income and taxes went to support her until she finally took her life, and now I'll be paying for that boy. He'll be on Social Security disability, surviving children till he's 18. So liberals once knew this. Did you know that? Liberals once agreed to this until they started pushing the agenda for fatherless families, and eventually it'll be motherless families. Because of they want to scrub the idea of marriage out of our society. So normal people that are uncorrupted, still uncorrupted, which I think they may be in minority now by this kind of poisonous ideology, understand the importance of two parents, mother and father. And studies, honestly, really honest, true studies, not studies that are paid off by some political agenda, they affirm that kids who grow up with a mother and father are less likely to be poor, to end up in prison, less likely to get addicted to drugs, and are generally healthier and stronger and more successful. Now, we spend lots of time stopping drugs at the border, busting drug labs, doing this, stop this, don't do this, don't do that, instead of focusing on helping parents stay together and raise their kids proper. So when mom and dads are involved, you think, oh, I know somebody had a mom and dad and they're drug addicts. Well, yeah, I'm not saying 100% of the time, but if you look at statistics, trends, kids who grow up with a mom and dad are less likely to be poor, to end up in prison, to get addicted to drugs or alcohol, and are generally healthy and stronger, more successful. The most common denominator among men in prisons is not income or class distinction, not black or white, not high school or college diploma, not ethnic or racial background, but whether they grew up with a father. Wikiman wants to do some talking, so here we go. All right. After the break there at Fox News, you heard Ben Shapiro talking about socialism. I wanted to read you a story about that, and then we'll go back to the importance of fathers and the fact that 26 of 27 young men who were mass shooters, the last 27, did not have a biological father in their life. So the story goes, a young woman was about to finish her first year of college, and like so many young people today, she considered herself to be a liberal Democrat. And among the other liberal ideas she embraced was she was very much in favor of higher taxes to support more government programs like we're doing in Yuba and Sutter County. In other words, that when you want higher taxes, that means you want to take money from me to give to people that just want to walk around and smoke weed all day and drink some wine. In other words, it's called redistribution of wealth. It's socialism. So she, after going to college for a year or two, she was very ashamed of her father, who was a staunch Republican in his views. She loved him, but she was ashamed of him, and a feeling she openly expressed. Based on the lectures that she had listened to at college and the occasional chat with a professor, she felt that her father had for years harbored an evil, selfish desire to keep what he thought was his. Well, one day she was challenging her father, giving him a hard time. I remember these days when he used to come home from college. They're embarrassing to me. My parents are both dead. I still feel bad about it. But she challenging her father on his opposition to higher taxes on the rich and the need for more government programs. So her self-professed objectivity proclaimed by her professors, she felt had to be the truth. You know, kids really, if they're told something by their teachers, when they come home, they think the teachers are smarter than their parents. Do you know that? I remember my son came home. He was just a little guy, and he was learning his basic math, and he came home and said, I was trying to help him with it. I said, oh, this isn't the way to do that. This is over here. He said, no, Mr. So-and-so. He said, this is the way to do it. I'm doing it right, Dad. I said, well, you're not, that ain't right. You may have misunderstood him. No. He said it right. So teachers have power, right? So the professors proclaimed objectivity, like they're very, like they know what they're talking about, right? Had to be the truth, and she pressed that upon her father. He responded by asking her, the daughter, how she was doing in school. Taken aback, she kind of answered like proudly, like, hey, I got a 4.0 GPA. And let him know how hard she was working. And she was taking a really heavy course load and studying all the time. In other words, she's working her finger to the bone. And she was, in other words, she was at work at school, working at school. And she wasn't partying or anything like that, like other people she knew. She mentioned other people. She said, yeah, they party, but I don't. In other words, you sent me to school, I'm doing it. I got a 4.0. So she said, I don't even have time for a boyfriend. And because she spent all the time studying. So the father listened for her rant and then asked, how's your friend Audrey doing? And the daughter said, well, Audrey's barely getting by. She takes easy classes and doesn't study and basically struggles to get a 2.0. So he said, the daughter said she's really popular on campus and she's having a blast at college. So she always gets to come up to the parties, and a lot of times she's hungover, etc. In other words, she just described one approach to college. And she said, my approach is I want to go get a job, etc. So the wise father asked the daughter, why don't you go to the dean's office and ask him to deduct 1 point off your GPA and give it to your friend Audrey? And that will increase her GPA to 3. And then you both can be equal. And that would be fair, right? A redistribution of GPA. The daughter totally freaked out. Said, that's crazy. That's a crazy idea. How could that be fair? I've worked hard for my grades. I've foregone parties and boyfriends and taken it easy. Audrey's just screwed off. She's done nothing towards her degree. She played while I worked. Father smiled and said gently, welcome to the conservative philosophy. Well, it's important, back in the 60s when people said you don't need to be married, it's just a certificate, and if the one you love is not there right now, then love the one you're with. That philosophy. In other words, we don't need to be moral. We don't need to live by any rules or standards. It doesn't really make any difference. If you want to be female and you want to be the female, or male with a male, or you want to do drugs, it'll all work out. So, on Father's Day in 2008, the Mr. Dysfunction himself, Senator Barack Obama, who was raised in a dysfunctional family situation, his father forsook him, went back to Africa, and to get out of paying child support. And yet Barack Obama became more like his delinquent father than he did his responsible white parents. It's interesting, in juvenile hall, kids say to me they're so angry about their dads abandoning them, but they'll turn around and raise their hands someday in a meeting we'll have tomorrow, and they'll say, Lou, did you hear? I had a baby. And they're 16 years of age. And they said, you want to see a photo? And I said, well, what are you going to do with a baby? You're in here, and you keep coming back here, so it sounds like you're becoming the same father you hated, right? So that's what Barack did, but it's interesting that Senator Barack Obama said this. We need fathers, he said. Maybe he was having nostalgic thought of his father leaving for Africa. He says, we know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of schools, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. But then somehow later, as he becomes president, it's white people's problem that put black people in prison. He says they are more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teenage parents themselves, like my friends in juvenile hall. And the foundations of our community are weaker because of it. Obama goes on to say, of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, family is the most important, and we are called to recognize and honor how critical every father is to that foundation. If we are honest with ourselves, according to Senator Barack Obama, we will admit that too many fathers are missing. They are missing from too many lives and too many homes. So, the modern secular progressive project or movement cannot be honest with itself. They're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. And a lot of us conservatives are too sissified and too much pansied and too weak. We're like little mice hiding in the corner to stand up against this and speak the truth. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that in public. And seeking to fundamentally transform human nature, the progressive movement has to oppose human nature. Let me say that again. In seeking to fundamentally transform human nature, the progressive movement must deny and oppose human nature. In seeking to fundamentally transform reality, it must deny reality. Ironically, the President Obama, who became the president of fundamental transformation in this country to change everything about it to reflect his father, his dysfunctional father, who was a communist, a Marxist. He actually spearheaded the very insanity. You remember when he illuminated the new White House in rainbow colors? You wonder, like, who is this person? This guy's got a screw loose, right? And he wanted to go through the entire nation to renovate everything from school bathrooms to be transsexual bathrooms. Use whatever bathroom you want, shower you want. Change the definition of gender and what marriage and family actually was. So in order to do all this, they got to reject the notion that the best model for a child is a home with a mom and a dad. There was a guy, a senator, you should look him up. He is a liberal senator from the state of Massachusetts. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, not Moynihan, Moynihan. And if you go back to see what his views were, he rocked the Democrat Party because he said what we have created is a welfare state that is dismantling the American family. And then government people go back and say, we don't know how we ended up here. It's just like Scott Mitnick and Robert Bendorf will not deal with the fundamental dysfunction of our communities and instead just want more and more money to put dysfunctional people up in housing when they should have taken care of their own housing. Bill Clinton in the 1990s, or Daniel Patrick Moynihan, they championed the National Fatherhood Initiative. It's interesting. Bill Clinton was raised without a father. Did you know that? And look how screwed up he is. What an idiot. If I or anybody in this community would have done what Bill Clinton did with women, we'd have been serving the rest of our life in prison and been on the sex registration disc or roll. For a while, there was actually a consensus among liberals and conservatives of the importance of fathers. But now, liberals cannot admit that fathers make a difference. And as you just heard on the Fox News here, the last few minutes, they talked about the government of the United States is still focusing on the problem is a piece of metal called a gun, wood and metal. The problem is metal. It's such a fraud, and actually the Trump administration and the administration of Florida, supposedly conservative, have bought into this. It's totally nonsense. It's that they're fighting the natural law, and it ain't going to work. It's like somebody saying, I'm a female on the outside, but I'm a male on the inside. It's nutso. So it's just something for you to think about. Now, I was thinking about, I was over there in the development across the street from me at where CVS is in Marysville, 10th and E, and all those businesses, and I was watching those security people work over there because the homeless want to take over that development, that business development has Tri-County Bank and all those Starbucks and all. And Starbucks is the biggest culprit. They're wanting to foster and take in all these refugees and everything. And I was thinking of Monty Hecker with the Elite Universal Security and how thankful I am. And I reflected on the fact that over in Yuba City, where they continue to not enforce the laws on vagrancy, that Monty, actually his organization, is doing the job that the police used to do. Now, I'm not against the police. In fact, I work with them every day, law enforcement, and I like law enforcement. And actually, it's biblical. It's actually mentioned in the Bible that God endorses law enforcement. But God does not endorse law enforcement that does not do its job. The problem is law enforcement is overseen by political figures who a lot of times prevent them from doing the job that they need to do. So they just have to stand down and then hide because people are saying, how come you don't do this? How come you don't do that? So now today, we've had these things called security companies spring up that are now doing the job that law enforcement used to do because society is becoming more and more chaotic. And I was just telling Mike out here today, that I met him in the lobby here at the station, how at Glad Tidings, we had a warehouse where we kept things and redistributed, supplies and stuff, a large 6,000 square foot warehouse, and we could not keep the tweakers out. They always wanted to be on the inside of the warehouse. And they would back into the front door and blow the roll-up door off its hinges. They would back in and crash the person door, and they'd actually take the siding off the building. And we continued to have that problem until we moved somebody in there. and now we have somebody living, and we solved that. But I thought back in the day, we would never have to do that. So we've had to do that over the entire campus. We got people living all over out there, and now we don't have a problem. But I was thinking that the company I spoke of last week in Yuba City off Stafford Way there, that they had to hire Monty at Elite Universal Security to come in and catch a homeless person who came and used their back steps as a toilet and left his deposit there and left his coffee cup and his donut wrapper and his newspaper there that he stole off the business just down the way. And Monty put up a camera and recorded him and finally got the cops over there. But Monty had to do all the sleuthing, the detective work, the private dick work. And so if you have a problem like that, which I'm sure you do, like the whole complex, the business complex, it's the most recent development in Marysville. It's full of businesses. You can't hardly get a parking space in there. There's full of panhandlers and people sleeping on the sidewalk, and so they had to hire Monty Hecker, Elite Security, to come over there and solve it. So if you're a business or a homeowner, maybe you're a homeowner and you're near one of these camps. Maybe Monty can solve your problem. Monty told me the other day, he said, our problem, Lou, is sometimes we just work. I work myself out of a job because I solved the problem. Then they don't want to hire me anymore. I have to go on to the next problem. So you can call 749-0280 if you need the help of, I call them Universal Security or Elite Security, Elite Universal Security. Or you can go on their website at eliteuniversalsecurity.com and you can get some help. And I'll talk about their schools in a bit. I also want to mention another group that supports us is the Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots. And they're meeting on the first and third Mondays of every month at the Church of Glad Tidings facility at 1179 Eager Road or Highway 99 in Eager Road, just north of Yuba City. It's about 3 minutes north of the mall in Yuba City. And they meet at 6:30 at night. They're going to have a sheriff's forum coming up this Monday night. And they, is it this Monday night? I think it's this Monday night. Let's see. No, it's the third Monday night. So it's coming up on the 19th. So, but they're going to have a sheriff's forum coming up. And maybe you haven't met, I know all the sheriff's candidates, but maybe you haven't met them and you'd like to talk to them and ask them a question and get the vibe. So that's coming up here pretty soon, and you could check it out. You don't need to belong. If it's the only time you ever check into that, you can just dip in at some of the benefits they offer is create a forum where you can see them up close and personal and ask them questions. And so they also have ongoing great speakers, and they had candidate for Governor Cox not too long ago. And one of my friends, Dave Greenitz, who helps the program here, Dave Greenitz Construction, he went and he said, Lou, I was able to talk to him face to face. He said, I never got to talk to him if the Tea Party Patriots hadn't brought him to town. So anyway, check it out this coming the third Monday of the month. I think it's the 19th, and they're going to have that event there. And the election's just not too far away. We're talking June, it's just around the corner. So check it out. All right. I wanted to, I do a lot of work in the Yuba County Jail, and a lot of it involves working with a lot of people that are from out of this country. They're ICE inmates, Immigration Customs Enforcement. That's the new term for immigration, ICE, and it works under Homeland Security. So a lot of the people in the classes I have are female and male ICE inmates. So they're from all over, China, Philippines, Honduras, San Salvador, Guatemala, Laos, Vietnam, all over the place. Very interesting. And so I get to meet people that some of them were here legally, but they weren't citizens, but then they committed a crime, and so now they're their benefits of being here are in jeopardy. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about this whole thing of people being able to walk across the border. So one of the guys I was talking to said that he had 4 DUIs and he had a hit and run, but he never really hurt anybody. It's always interesting how people justify their life, and how he was actually married to an American citizen, but because his paperwork never did get done, he's looking at deportation. But he said, Lou, I'm not worried about it. I'll just come back in, right? And honestly, people, if you listen to politicians, you just don't get it, because when you know the people that are coming in, there is no fear, there's no retribution. They don't have any concern about crossing that border and coming right back into town. So this article I'm going to talk to you more about when we come back here in a few minutes is this Mexican guy was living on both sides of the border, and he stole an American's identity, and for 37 years he's been getting benefits from the U.S. government, and he collected $361,000 in benefits before they caught him. So we'll be right back, and you can just ponder that for a second. All right, you're listening to Live with Lou. This is at KMYC, The Patriot, and 1410 AM. If you just caught part of this show and you think, oh, I'm sorry I missed part of that, or I'm happy I missed it, for those who wanted to catch some we already talked about, you can go to One Eye Blind Media on YouTube, One Eye Blind Media, later today, probably tonight, and look to the Live with Lou list, and you can dip back in here. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Mexican and Latin America problem coming across the southern border in a minute. But I want to, when you, like me, maybe you're frustrated with representatives who are bought and paid for by special interests, I want you to listen to a Delaware representative in the State House of Delaware talk about gun violence. And this guy just speaks from the hip. He does not have notes. I want you to listen. Nick Freitas.
Over the last several days, Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of discussion about an open and honest debate with respect to school shootings, gun violence, gun control, etc. And an open and honest debate, as I understand it, is one that would rely on data, facts, evidence, analysis, reason, logic, etc., etc. And I'm certainly willing to have that debate. I think if we were going to look seriously at school shootings and gun control, we would analyze things like, why do all mass shootings seem to take place in gun-free zones? Wouldn't it be reasonable to test whether or not the efficacy of gun-free zones have actually achieved what their intent is? We would start to look at most of these shooters come from broken homes. What sort of government policies have actually encouraged broken homes? You can look at left-leaning think tanks like the Brookings Institute that will actually say that some of it can be attributed to various cultural changes that happened in the 60s, to include the abortion industry. You can look at more conservative-leaning organizations that will say that the welfare state contributed significantly to dismantling the family as families became more and more dependent upon the government than they were mothers and fathers in the home raising children. We could look at various status with those areas within the United States and around the world that have strict gun control measures and what their crime rates look like, whether it's Chicago, New York City, Washington, D.C., and others that have incredibly strict gun laws, and yet for some reason it hasn't seemed to stop the gun violence in those particular areas. We can look at the analysis out of 538, which is considered more of a left-of-center data analysis think tank, where you had several analysts now confirm through the data that they were looking at, not just in the United States, but in Canada, Great Britain, and Australia, that they were shocked that the data did not support what they thought gun control measures would actually achieve. We can look at the number of cases within the United States where a gun has been used for self-defense. Estimates range everywhere from 100,000 uses to close to 1 million uses within the United States. Now, some organizations and some reporters only want to report on the ones where a gun was used and it actually resulted in the death or maiming of the perpetrator. But if you look at the ones where the gun was used and the mere presence of the firearm actually dissuaded a criminal from committing an act of violence, an act of rape, an act of murder, the number shoots up, it skyrockets. So when people on this side talk about the importance of the Second Amendment, please understand it's not just some base philosophical conviction that we all have. It is rooted in the idea that while we may be a post-Enlightenment society, the vast majority of horrible atrocities that we've seen have happened in those post-Enlightenment societies. Has happened as a result of government systematically disarming citizens and claiming themselves to be the sole responsible party for their security, and then turning on those same citizens and punishing them. That's the most egregious cases. But in the individual cases of self-defense, that's why the people on this side of the aisle hold the Second Amendment in such high esteem, because we honestly believe that you have an inherent right to defend yourself. And your ability to defend yourself should not be excluded to your size. Firearms provide someone that is weaker and not as fast the ability to actually defend themselves from a stronger attacker. Some of the other things that we would look at, and some of the things I would hope we would have bipartisan support for, all of us agree that we need to make sure that our students are better protected when they go to schools. One of the things that we would look at is arming certain teachers. Not every teacher, but a teacher that is comfortable with it, is former law enforcement, is former military, that is now in the classroom. Delegate Plum said yesterday that that was ridiculous to consider. Why? Is it because the other side of this debate will only accept one quote-unquote solution to this problem, and that is tearing apart or gutting the Second Amendment? And I understand, we're going to mention just a couple of the bills that were done this year, right? Background checks, getting rid of bump stocks. If you're wondering the other reason why we can't have an honest debate over this one, is because, quite frankly, I don't think any of us on this side of the aisle believe you when you say that's all you want to do. It'll be bump stocks, it'll be background checks, then it'll be different kind of background checks that register the guns. Then after that, it'll be we need to ban assault weapons. What's an assault weapon? Something that looks scary. Then after that, it'll be semi-automatic rifles. After that, it'll be semi-automatic handguns. Then it'll be revolvers, shotguns. Because when the policies fail to produce the results you are promising to your constituents, you'll be back with more reasons on why we've got to infringe on Second Amendment rights. The other reason why it's really difficult to have an honest and open debate about this is because of this, members of this body comparing members on this side of the aisle to Nazis. Members on the other side of the aisle saying that when a 24-year-old teacher gets up and says that the whole debate is between the Second Amendment or her life, that's a false dilemma. And quite frankly, one of the ones that I found the most offensive, along with being compared to Nazis, was being compared to segregationists. I just want to remind everyone very quickly, it was not our party that supported slavery, that fought women's suffrage, that rounded up tens of thousands of Asian Americans and put them in concentration camps, that supported Jim Crow, that supported segregation, or supported mass resistance. That wasn't our party. That was the Democrat Party. Now, I'm thrilled that Democrats no longer believe that, and I don't believe that a single current member of this body who is a Democrat ever believe those things, but I would really appreciate it if every time you want to make a powerful point, you don't project the sins, the atrocities, and the injustices that the Democratic Party perpetrated on others onto us. So if we want to have an open and honest debate, I am all for that. Let's do that. But it does start with a certain degree of mutual respect. It starts with a certain degree of not assuming that the only reason why we believe in the Second Amendment is because the NRA paid us off. Well, if that's the sort of logic you want to use, why don't you go take a look at how much money the NRA spends and how much money Planned Parenthood spends? Because when I get up here and I talk about abortion, I don't assume that you're all bought and paid for by Planned Parenthood. I don't assume you're horrible people because I disagree with you on a policy position. I assume you have deep convictions and that we can have an argument and a debate about it. But if you're not willing to reciprocate that level of respect, well, don't be surprised when it becomes more difficult to talk about these things. Because there is a lot that we can do, and there is a lot that we need to do to ensure the security of our children and our citizens. But yes, we are going to have a problem with so-called solutions which infringe on people's liberty under the promise the government will provide for their security. Because ultimately in this last school shooting, we had a perfect example of government being engaged over 30 times and still failing to provide security for those students. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. Well, I hope that helps you frame in what's really going on here. I wanted to piggyback on that to talk about the border situation and how the liberal element in the country does not want to really solve the problem. Neither do they want to solve school safety. It's very simple. If I wanted to have total safety in my life, I would do what Governor Brown does, and that's have a personal security force around me. In other words, wherever he rides in a car, it's being driven by a cop, right? In fact, I know the guy, he used to be from Yuba City, and he's armed, and he'll shoot you if you want to mess with Governor Brown or with any other politician or any Hollywood elite. In other words, if you want really good security, you hire somebody that protects you. But the government isn't really, they act like they talk a good talk, but they are not going to do what you want them to do, and that's protect the kids. Because it's very simple. All you'd have to do is have guards at the school, more than one, and have fences that actually you cannot get through unless you get permission to get through. You just can't walk on in there. Like I can walk right into Mary Kovalod School down the street from my house. It's got fences around it, but there's openings in the fences. That's crazy, right? So there's a way to solve this very simply. Any place in society in this United States of America that we want to stop people from crossing, like if I want to go to Beale Air Force Base, I cannot just walk onto Beale Air Force Base down the street here, out North Beale Road, because there's a guard shack there with people with automatic weapons, and they're surveying the fencing all around the base because they don't want people just sauntering out there. So everywhere, like for instance, if I go into Yuba City Police Department and I open the front door during the day, there is a very thick, I think it's bulletproof shield separating me from the workers in the police department. Now, the police department is loaded with weapons, and yet those primarily females working on the other side of that glass, the records people and the people that take care of the public, they are separated by, it looks like an inch thick glass thing that you cannot, I'm sure that's stopping bullets, and then they have little holes that can let your voice through, and then there's a little pass-through thing for documents. Now, that's a police department that's protecting itself. If I go to, in fact, I went to Yuba County Sheriff's Department, Sutter County Sheriff's Department, and Yuba City Police Department all this last week, and I had to deliver documents. And all of them were like fortresses. And all those guys got M16s, they got shotguns. That place is loaded with weapons. And yet, they have the best security in town. Now, think about that for a minute. And all of our little kids that are the most precious thing to us, precious thing to every parent, anybody can walk in there and do whatever they want at any campus in these two counties, Yuba Sutter counties. I'm telling you, it's as porous can be. I don't care whether there's a fence up there for decor. These school districts wasted millions of dollars on fencing that's not even secure. It's stupid. It's like putting a roof on your house and leaving holes every once in a while. It's just the most stupid thing. It's because they don't want to do the liberals. If you left it up to the Republican conservatives in this state, they would arm these schools. They would just flat arm them. But you have this resistance, and these kids they're bait. They're just being used as bait. But everywhere else, you have any of these politicians going around, they got bodyguards all the time. So it's the same way with the border situation. Now listen, there are all kinds of criminals, but in my past life, we smuggled drugs across that Mexican border. It's just happening every day. You people that think, oh, well, they're just like nice Mexican people and other nationalities that just want a good job at 7-Eleven. You're as dumb as a doorpost. You're just as stupid as a concrete pillar. You have no idea what you're talking about. There are criminals coming across that border every minute of every day. They're hauling people that have paid them to smuggle them into the country. They're hauling drugs. They're hauling weapons. Both ways. Weapons are going both ways. Don't you remember Fast and Furious? When our own Attorney General weaponized Mexicans with thousands of weapons and walked away free, no problem. Lied about it, did everything, right? Eric Holder. Weapons going both ways. Drugs going both ways. People going both ways. Abducted. Terrorists coming in here. It just, come on, man. Do you realize that there's fences at the southern border of Mexico keeping people out of Central America from busting through to Mexico? And they're still coming through down there. Mexico is one of the most dangerous, has more of the most, when they rate the most dangerous cities in the United States, in the world, Mexico has most of them, the most murderous cities in the world. So we have people down there that this child income credit. Mexicans are filing income taxes when they don't even owe. They're not even going to get any back, but you can get an earned income credit if you have a child, and they don't even belong here. They're fictitious. They don't even have a residence here. They file on a residence up here that somebody lives at and then collect the money. Millions and millions of dollars child income credit they're claiming illegally. Now, this guy, for 37 years, he collected, this is your government at work, $361,000 in government benefits. He had multiple names. I won't go through all the names to take the time. In April 2015, during a standard review to determine whether he was still eligible for benefits, a man who called himself Riojos gave an address on San Isidro Boulevard to a mailbox rental facility. When he was summoned to the Chula Vista office for an interview, he presented a state ID card, identified himself as such, Riojos, and claimed to be renting a room from a man on I Street in Chula Vista. But when the investigators visited the home in January 2016, the man admitted Riojos, the man who lived there, admitted Riojos never lived there, but instead lived in Mexico. Now, I'm told that the Sutter County Welfare does not even go out and confirm where people live. They just give you the money. They don't even go and confirm locations. Like, are you who you say you are, and do you live there? The investigators went to the criminal records, finding the initial man claiming to be Riojos had a rap sheet that included 21 different names and 6 dates of birth dating back to 1974. They included a firearms violation, forgery, cocaine possession, multiple DUIs. Immigration records rounded out the picture. He'd been deported twice, once in 94 and again in 2000. During the last deportation, he had given authorities his real name, John Reyes. And anyway, the article is just fascinating. It's a very long article. The reporter spent a lot of time digging through all the stuff. My point is there is mass corruption and criminality, and we need a border wall, and we need to vet people a lot more seriously than we've been vetting them. Now, I want to give you another example. This is how crazy it is on the border. Now, I've played clips in the past where it showed the border fence around San Diego, where they said until that fence was put up, a high fence, hundreds of thousands of people were being detained coming through there. And once the fence was there, businesses felt safe to build on both sides of the wall. So now the latest thing is that a Tijuana judge, this is a municipal court judge, was busted at the border carrying almost 39 pounds of cocaine. He was coming into the U.S. These guys, he didn't feel like he was making enough down there in Tijuana. So he was busted. I've crossed this border many, many, many times. San Ysidro, port of entry. And so first of all, anyway, this guy, this judge, I'm just going to call him Eduardo, his first name, just for simplicity. He presented the border crossing guard a crossing card, and advised that he was heading to Chula Vista and claimed he had nothing to declare. He related that the Jeep belonged to him and only he and his girlfriend used it. As part of the inspection, they used a density meter to measure various parts of the vehicle that are known to contain contraband. During the inspection, a high reading was detected on the door panels. Once again, Eduardo said, no, we're good to go. Nothing to declare. So they brought in a dog, and the dog looked over at his handler and said, hey, there's dope in that door. This is hilarious. A subsequent search of the vehicle produced, then they x-rayed it. First they did this density thing, then they brought in the dog. The dog said, hey, there's dope in there. And then they x-rayed it, and then they found 11 packages of cocaine. And then they found an additional 5 parcels in the rear door panel. So this guy down in Mexico, this is a municipal court judge. He makes $898.62 a month. No wonder he's wanting to smuggle cocaine. That's Mexican. All you people that think, oh, Mexico, oh, yeah, Mexico, big time. Yeah, they're really doing good. You know something? The reason that country's so screwed up, because they're socialists. They got their own oil. They got the coast. They got recreation, tourism. They grow all our avocado. They got all kinds of farming. I've been down to Baja. They got great farmland, wonderful weather. Totally corrupt, right? So we got a couple minutes. We got one more minute. So anyway, when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about 42 of the 50 most violent peacetime cities in the world are where? In Latin America. All right, we're in the last hour here. We're cruising up to noon today, live with Lou, and then they'll do some sports talk this afternoon. And I think, hey, is not Disco Danny, but our radio man, does he do the sports talk at 6 o'clock tonight? Is it? Yeah? Zach, he told me, he said, Lou, why don't you mention my sports show at 6 o'clock tonight? So Zach comes on. He used to help us here years ago, so he's up in Nevada County, but he comes down and does a sports show tonight. So if you like sports, Zach will do some more sports at 6 tonight. Okay, so 42 of the 50 most violent peacetime cities in the world are in Latin America. That's why the border is huge. The southern border is huge. If you want to try to get in from the east or the west, you got to cross the water. You get it? Canada is a problem, but not as big. Of the 50 cities in the ranking, 17 are located in Brazil, 12 in Mexico, 5 in Venezuela, 4 in the United States, 3 in Colombia, 3 in South Africa, 2 in Honduras. There is 1 in El Salvador, Guatemala, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica. Okay? That's the most violent cities in the world. As I said, 4 in the United States. Now this is figuring out how many murders per capita. So Chicago, which you would think would be on here, isn't on here because they got lots of murders, but it's a massive city, right? So they may have the most murders, but it's a massive city, so it doesn't come out per capita. Like I don't want to get bogged down here, but like St. Louis is 13th place with about 66 murders per 100,000. Baltimore, 21st place, 55 murders per 100,000. New Orleans, 41st place, 40 murders per 100,000. Detroit, 42 on the list, 40 murders per 100,000. The council that did the research, Council on Public Security, reported Los Cabos in Mexico, the most dangerous city in the world with an estimated 111 plus murders per 100,000. But the highest number of murders in the world, not the highest number per 100,000, but the highest number of murders in a year, 3,387, is in the socialist model country of Venezuela in Caracas. That's down there where, you know, they used to be the most successful country in South America, most prosperous. Now they eat rats. They eat the zoo animals, right? They're eating rats, zoo animals, and whatever they can find to kill because they say the average person in Venezuela has lost 19 pounds on the socialism diet. So Mexico houses a dozen of the top 50 deadliest cities, including 2 that border the United States, Reynosa and Juarez. Just something to think about here. That's why we need border control. And you think, oh, we're just going to trust people. Honestly, people, if you believe the liberals in the state of California, you're insane. You're nutso. So I want to talk about the city of Marysville, which is just, they're not unique or exclusive to mismanagement, but they are a poster child for mismanagement. So the government wants you to think that, hey, we've been doing our job. We don't know how it happens, but we're just short of money. We just can't keep up. And they always use the idea of police and fire is the problem, right? Because they know that's the mandate of government. When people formed governments, they usually formed them to provide more public safety because they say, hey, we need to protect ourselves, right, from culprits outside the United States and from down the street. So they organized into cities and counties and things like that, and they created police and fire departments. That was the main role of government. And then government decided, oh, well, let's do this program, and let's give everybody $500, and let's do this, and let's create this. And so let's hire a bunch of people, right? So Marysville used to be a very prosperous county or city and in Yuba County, and it was a booming city for many years. And then life changes, and it didn't change with it, and there's a lot of factors. But let me just tell you a disaster that happened in 2006. You remember 2006, the housing market was cooking in South Yuba County. And so 5 city council people, Bill Harris, Christina Bellici, Jerry Crippen, Jim Kitchen, and now Judge Ben Rorschafter, at that time he was a public defender, they decided they're going to get in the development business, these 5 people. They did not ask the permission from the city of city residents. They just began to negotiate with the Lanza family, and they wanted to take some property that was along Ellis Lake across the street from it on B Street, and they didn't have any money to invest. The budget was very tight. So it's like you want to invest in something or you want to invest in business, but you don't have any money to do it in. So usually you don't invest, right? Because nobody wants to loan you money on a dream you have. So these 5 people who have had the legal authority to go out and indebt the entire city, all the citizens, from newborn on to the oldest, they indebted the city in millions of dollars. They went out and floated bonds, and they bought up about 5 acres of property. 3.7 came from the Roy Lanza family. And then they bought up some adjacent houses, and they abandoned some streets, and they made it a big parcel, and their hope was to get a developer to come in and develop that property and make another tax flow, sales tax revenue stream for the city of Marysville. So they bought all that up, and one of the problems that the Lanzas had to develop that property is there was a gas line going under the property, and you can't develop the property without moving the gas line, and it was going to cost them to move the gas line. But if the city demanded that the gas line be moved, then the utility would have to move the gas line at no charge to the city. So the Lanzas colluded with the city, these 5 city council people, for the city to buy that property with money they did not have. They didn't have a nickel. And so they floated these bonds, and in October of 2006, the city issued nearly $5 million in debt. They call them certificates of participation to acquire and develop the property. Now, what that means is that when you can't pay them back, you can't the property, you can't foreclose on it. It's a bond. So what that means is that's against the general fund, not against the property. So that means the city would have to go bankrupt. So the Lanzas received nearly $3 million for their 3.7 acres. We paid top dollar for it. And so another $776,000 would pay the interest on the loan through October 2009, and $304,000 would cover the bonding company's services for making all this possible. $304,000 in the service fee. Another $395,000 was placed in a reserve account to satisfy bonding requirements. Then the housing crash happened. You remember that? And so the city council thought, hey, it's not our fault. It's like it's just a housing bubble. Like, it's not our fault. We didn't mean this to happen. But this is what happens when government, instead of just protecting the people and providing some infrastructure, gets into the business of redevelopment. When they don't have any money and they have no experience. No one on that city council knew jack diddly about development. So 5 years pass from 2006 to 2011, and the bond was due, and no payments had been made because they put off payments. And now on October 1, 2011, there was due $5,125,000 and change. The city had an option to refinance, or they could just start making payments, but they didn't. The property now had, instead of being worth $5 million, was probably worth $2 million, two and a half, something like that. They lost half their value. This is why the city shouldn't get into risky business, right? The citizens had no decision in this. There was no vote of the populace. They didn't take a survey. They didn't do jack. So if the city chose not to refinance the bond and pay the payments every 6 months, in 25 years, the property would have cost $11 million for 5 acres of property. $11 million in 25 years. Couldn't let the property go back. You can't let it. So we had 2 choices. Make the payments, which they had no money to make any payments. They had not sold the property. They didn't have any extra money. Otherwise, they would have had to shut down, say, the fire department or the police department, right? So on a 3-2 vote, Jim Kitchen, who died just recently, Jim Kitchen been on the board. He was an economics or business professor at Yuba College. He said if we reauthorize this, if we go out and rebond it, refinance it, you're going to bankrupt the city. So Dale Whitmore and Kitchen voted against it with other Christina Bellici and Ricky Scamayoa, and I think it was Bill Harris. They voted to refinance it, and they issued $7 million, this time $7 million in new bonds to pay for the $5 million plus interest and bonding costs, et cetera, et cetera. So now the payment is up for 5 acres of vacant property. They're looking at paying over 25 years. We will pay the taxpayers of all, as the tax money comes into the city from us taxpayers in Marysville, we will pay out over the next 25 years $15 to $17 million for that 5 acres of vacant property along Ellis Lake. Think about it now. Did you do one thing? You and City of Marysville, and maybe you in Oroville and Chico and Lincoln, maybe you've been screwed by the same type of stupid decision making. Instead of government people just doing their damn job, they screw people over by thinking they know what they're doing, and they have no idea because they have their name on a little placard on that bench they sit behind, and somehow they get so full of themselves they think they're going to change the world. And we didn't ask them to do that. Let me ask you a question. Do you think you can spend your money more efficiently, or you give it to government and they spend it more efficiently? Well, this is what we got. We have 5 acres of horrible-looking property along B Street that's now worth a couple $1 million, and we're going to spend nearly $17 million for that property. Then they turned around and they began to say, we don't have the money to make these payments. The payments are over $600,000 a year on this property. And we don't have the money to pay that payment, to pay those 25 years worth of payments. So, and the payments change over the years. So we need to, so in order, they weren't going to go sell that idea of like, hey, we screwed up, because government never admits they screw up. They always blame it on the population. So instead of going to the population and explaining the problem, they said, well, what we have a problem with, we just can't afford to do police and fire anymore. And we don't, if you don't give us 1% sales tax increase, we don't have enough money to pay for police and fire. So when you call 911, we cannot guarantee we're going to get there in like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. So there were alternatives. We could have let, like I was telling Dale Whitmore, he's a city councilman. I said, do you realize I'm in the city of Marysville. Do you realize that I'm paying for 2 law enforcement departments to defend me? If I was in the county, I'd only be paying for the county, right? I'd just be paying for the county sheriff. But here, I got to pay for the county sheriff, and I got to pay for a separate department to cover 3.4 square miles. We're paying over $1 million a mile in the city of Marysville, and the sheriff covers 644 square miles. Think about that. And I told him, I said, people from TIP, we just had people from Reno here training TIP volunteers, and I had people from San Diego coming up. They just laugh out loud. They said, Lou, this is the craziest community. You got a police department for this little bit of pothole right here? You got a 1 separate department? They just start cracking, and look at the roads. You darn near break your leg in some of those cracks in the roads. So, you remember about 2 years ago now, they pitched this idea, the city of Marysville, they wanted to raise 1% tax, and we voted against it. And as soon as they could, within a year and a half, they put it back on the ballot. And this time they had Roy Lanza and David Lanza fund, because it's against the law for the government to fund taxing a plan to tax the people, like a proposition or a measure. They can't take your tax dollars and create propaganda to convince you to pay them more tax dollars. But they did it in a roundhouse way. They colluded with the Lanzas, and they paid for the big public relations campaign. And you know what? Remember what that was? We can't lose one more cop. We can't lose one more cop. We can't lose one more cop. They didn't say we need to raise the wages of the boss of the city or the city workers. They didn't say we need to hire more consultants. They said all we need is 50% of the vote plus 1 vote. And they said, we promise we won't use any of the money irresponsibly. And Dale Whitmore doesn't remember this, but I said, you guys promise you're going to have a citizens blue ribbon committee overseeing all this money. Because if we could have restricted it, if they just wanted police and fire and we passed it by a 2/3 vote, then it would have gone in a separate fund and it just funded police and fire. But no. So the first thing they did after passing that, I think they passed it with an extra 200 votes. They gave everybody raises in the city. Then they turned around, and Dale and I talked about it last night. I said, you went out and got a loan buy all new police cars. What was it, 20 police cars? And I thought we just got $1.5 million to take care of the police department. Then you went out and borrowed more money. He said, well, I think we did a lease on that. I said, you sure? He said, well, I'm not sure. I said, well, if you're not sure, you're the city council. I said, do you think I just have pizza dreams and come up with this? They call me a liar all the time. I said, I was told that you were going out to and float more bonds to get enough money to buy 20 cars. He said, well, I think we lease it. I said, still a bad idea. Now, let me ask you this. When you, in your own personal budget, you see, sometimes we lose our mind when we get to government. We think, well, government, somehow they have different financial implications than in my own private budget. When I have to go out and borrow money to pay for something, that's a bad sign, because that means I don't have the money myself and I'm not living according to my means. My father always operated with cash because he went through the Depression and he saw what taking a risk could do if you get caught, right, with your pants down, as they say. So he used to, if he didn't have it, we couldn't afford it. That was like if you didn't have a stack of cash to buy a car, that equaled you couldn't afford it in my family when I was raised. And so I learned that. So when you have to go out and borrow, like when the county of Yuba has to borrow from the Yuba County Water Agency, or we have to borrow, or we can't afford to buy a car, we have to pay for it on a lease. You're paying a premium. Like he said, well, this is a lease. I said, yeah, you're paying a premium to buy those cars, right? And then at the end, you don't even have an asset. You just quit paying for it, and still you don't have cars. Then what are you going to do? Because you're not setting aside a budget for cars. You get it? So now they passed the sales tax measure, and we're getting it supposedly $1 million, $1.5 million a year. What do you think's happened to that money? Well, I'll tell you what's happening, because money is getting spent hand over fist. Now, the city manager, Marty Brown, got all pissed off at me because I mentioned in the paper that she said on the radio. I'm not reading her mind. I'm looking at what the things are coming out of her mouth. She just stated an opinion. I didn't say she's a bad person. She said to John Black on a 93Q interview the other day that maybe some of that tax money could be used to repair the parks. Well, the parks are horrible in Marysville, but that's not what that tax money was for. We raised that money to have a top-notch lawn. If we weren't going to let Steve Durfer at the Sheriff's Department run it, which that's what should have happened, that would have saved us $1 million a year. But no. We want to pay an extra. You ever see somebody buy a fancy car you know they can't afford? It's an ego trip. It's a damned ego trip. They got a car. They can't afford to take their wife out to dinner and spend the night somewhere. But they're going to have a fancy car they're paying $500 or $400 a month for. You know they can't even afford that car. If they miss, they're just a payment away from bankruptcy, right? And so the city, it's an ego trip to have your own police department. That's all it is it's a full-blown ego trip, because we could have a better service. It's nothing against the cops. I like the cops. And they could go to work for whoever they want. They could work for the Sheriff's Department or whatever. But why don't we have an East Marysville Police Department and a West Marysville Police Department? Why do we have a police chief for every fire station? Or a fire chief for every fire station. We got a fire chief for one station fire chief, and now he's going to quit, and we're going to have to spend $22,400 for a headhunter. Why don't they just put it out on Facebook? We're looking for a fire chief. We'll be right back. I want to finish up talking about Marysville. It's crazy. They've lost their mind in the city council. All right. Well, we're going to be landing the plane here in a bit. So I wanted to mention again the Sutter Butte Tea Party Patriots meeting on the 19th, where they're going to have a bi-county sheriff's town hall. And that's at 6:30 at the Church of Glad Tidings at Highway 99 and Eager Road. Don't miss it. 6:30 at night. It opens at 6. You don't need to belong. You don't need to pay anything. Should be a great time. Also, on the following Sunday, on March 25th, in Building 500, the first building they meet in is Building 200. Building 500 in the back of the campus, they have what they call a constitutional sheriff's class, and that if you've never understood like who the ranking members of a county are, knows who's the most powerful, who makes the decision when the going gets really difficult, and the power of a sheriff in a county, it's very interesting, and I think we're going to need it in this sanctuary state fight that's occurring right now. So you can go to that, and doors. You can call 530-415-0343. 415-0343 to find out more about the Constitutional Sheriff's class. So the other thing is I want to mention one more time about Monty Hecker with his Elite Universal Security. They have a school where they train you. It's called API Academy, or you can look it up on the internet, api-academy.com. And it's a schooling to train guards if you want to go into the security business, and everything from getting your CCW, your concealed weapons permit, to guard card training, pepper spray, handcuffing, all kinds of training. So you can look on that site and you can see what kind of training is coming up, and you can be 18 years of age and get into on some of that training. And you can get a jump maybe if the classes, you can't start at Yuba College yet. You want to take some police classes out there, and you want to get some of these skills under your belt regarding handcuffing, taser, de-escalation, all that kind of stuff. You can get it through Monty right here in Yuba County. And so you can call them at 749-0280. That's a 530 area code, 749-0280. So I want to finish up today talking about the mismanagement of government. Now, the Walter Munchheimer, who was the city manager for about 5 years in the city of Marysville, left after they gave him a raise, but he had a difference in opinion with the city council over how to go about hiring future employees in the administration of the city. So he says, he took his marbles and went home. So he took his marbles in his retirement and went back to Florida, where they don't pay as much taxes, I think. So anyway, they looked for another person, and of all the people they could find, they found the current city administrator who worked for Arvin, California, and they went so broke that they let her go because they couldn't afford to pay her. And she was in charge of development. And so generally, Darren Gale is in charge of development in the city of Yuba City. And I always look at people in charge of development and government as actually anti-development. They're the ones that make it more difficult for businesses to flourish. They tell you what all the rules are. And if there were fewer rules, more business would occur. So if a bit like in the city of Yuba City, it's flourishing not because of a development director, but because business has analyzed that because of the population and the economy of the city of Yuba City, this is a good place to invest your money, right? Whether you're a restaurant or whatever's coming in here. Listen, if you've ever been in business, which I was for many years, you make your analysis not on what the development director says, but on what the property's worth, the traffic count, the economics, the per capita income. That's why if you wonder, how come there's no Costco here? The reason is the annual income is not high enough here. That's why Sam's moves here, but Costco, they can't afford to come here. So they're in Chico and they're Roseville. So it has nothing to do with the development director, right? So what happened is Arvin simply went broke. They can't afford to have a development director, so we hired the development director to run our city. Does that make sense? That's what the city council did. Nothing against the lady. It's like she could be a wonderful lady. I'm just saying. So what happens is we were totally broke. We were so broke, according to the city council and DeLonz's, that they had to have 1% more sales tax anything sold in the city of Marysville, or if you live in the 95901 area code, you're going to pay an extra 1% on your car if you buy it anywhere, including outer Slombodia. So the city council, you would think they would be concerned about how they spend their money, but they're hiring a guy that for a one-day seminar, it's essentially an encounter session for $12,000. That includes the mayor and the city administrator get to have dinner with this guy. Now, that pisses me off because if I was getting $120,000 a year to work for the city, I could buy my own dinner, right? In other words, I eat all the time. I eat every day. Do you eat every day? You eat every day. It's the only thing I can get high off of anymore is eating food. I can't do drugs. I can't do alcohol. I don't do none of that stuff anymore. And so food is a high for me. I just can't eat more than a couple times a day. But I always buy my own food. When I worked for the the church, I bought my own food. And so they can't even buy, in this budget, they are paying for the dinner for Ricky Scamayoa. I thought the marijuana people were buying him dinner. They gave him $10,000. So the city of Marysville is paying a guy $12,000 to have a meeting with him during the day. Now, I've been on the school board for many years, not on it now, but we had retreat after retreat after retreat where we set goals and visions and plans and planned out the next year, and we sorted out differences and never paid anybody any money because we had a good leader. We had Rick Teagarden was superintendent of schools, and he had all kinds of education. Like, that's why you pay people the big bucks to lead the city, to lead the education system, to lead, because they know how to lead a small group meeting and to set goals, set objectives, how to use a flip chart, how to use PowerPoint, how to use all this technology. They know. That's why you hire them. You do not hire them and pay them like Robert Bendorf $250,000 and then hire consultants at $12,000 a day to come in. Now listen what they're going to do. Now, do you know something? I was talking to Dale Whitmore, and he's a city councilman for Marysville, and he said, Lou, he said, I voted against this, and he said, I asked them where the last review. They did a review last April. Last April, folks, for those that have been on drugs, it's 2017, last April. They did a review under Walter Munchheimer, ran the retreat, and they discussed where should we go from here. Do you know what? No one in the city knows where it went. They cannot, it's stacked up somewhere in that city hall down there on the corner of 5th and C. They claim it's in there. I mean, not 5th and C, but 6th and C. They claim it's in the building, but we're paying the head of the office, Billy Fangman. She gets $100,000 a year. She can't find it. We paid Walter Munchheimer $120,000 a year. He couldn't. He doesn't know where he put it. This current administrator doesn't know where it is. City council people don't have a copy of it. I think if I was in on it, I would get a copy of it. I'd take it home with me because it might have some impact on my decision making in the next 12 months. But nobody even knows what they talked about. It's just, I think they were all under the influence of methamphetamines or something. So this is what the city manager says. The city manager said these types of annual goal, this is an annual meeting she wants to have, goal-setting retreats. I think they're good. We had them at the Yuba County Office of Education. They are common for cities and counties, especially when a city hires a new manager. Who cares whether it's a new manager or not? You need to have a meeting of the minds every once in a while. She says, according to the Appeal Democrat, this will help us make sure all our arrows are moving in the same direction. The plan is to flesh out exactly what the city's goals are. Now, we just did this with this bounce back program in Marysville. We spent a couple $100,000, I think. And we got a 3-ring binder of ideas. And it's just sitting on the shelf over there at 6th and C. And then we hired Rick. They paid Rick Teagarden a little bit, I think, unless he volunteered his time. He's a former superintendent of schools who was very successful in Yuba County. He's a brilliant leader, and they hired him. Then they did it on their own with Munchheimer. So why all of a sudden do we need to spend $12,000? I thought we were really hard up. The parks can't be taken care of. We can't water them. The lake stinks. We got all... I got cracks out in front of my house. If I don't have a flashlight at night, I'm going to snap my ankle. So Brown, the city administrator, said setting goals and prioritizing them was important because it will serve as, that's just like typical. You can read that out of any booklet. Why do we need to hire? Let's just eliminate the city council and the city administrator. That stuff, you can Google that and find that on Google. You could get a drug addict to come up with that list of stuff right there. The city already established bounce back. The Appeal Democrat said the city already established bounce back plan that similarly highlight. How many times are we going to highlight how screwed up the city is? It's like, how many times do you need to say it over and over again? What are we trying to do? It's just unbelievable. So now they voted to spend $12,000. Then they devoted to spend $22,400 to go look for a new fire chief, because the fire chief, this is amazing. I took economics in college, and they talked about a thing called economies of scale. That means if you create 1,000 of a product, it's cheaper than created the first product, right? The first one, right? You want to make one tire or 1,000 tires. It's cheaper to make all the tires per tire if you make 1,000. So the county supposedly did some survey where if you merged Olivehurst, Linda, and Marysville together, it was going to be less efficient than having just one chief per station. Now that is the most, listen, a meth addict out on Olivehurst Avenue could tell you that's stupid. Because if that's true, then the city of Yuba City that has 5 stations would have 5 chiefs. Right now we have one chief over Marysville. We used to have just one chief over Linda Station on Scales. Now he covers 2 stations, one in Plumas Lake and one on Scales and Linda. Then we have one chief over Olivehurst. It's just totally inefficient. People, we're a laughing stock of the state. And so now they're going to pay somebody $12,400 to go search for a, listen, I could find you a damn fire chief myself on Facebook. Listen, I could make one phone call to one of my fire contacts and put out a message up and down the state of California. We're looking for a fire chief, and all you have to do is run one station, for God's sake. 3.4 million. You can do that. Most of these fire leaders could do that in their sleep. You can do that without, honestly, you could be mentally ill and pull that off. And you're going to pay some headhunter $12,400 or $22,400 to find you that person. There's all kinds of firefighters that retire that would love that fire chief job. Amazing. We had all kinds of Yuba City firefighters that left and went up to Bend, Oregon, Roseburg, Oregon, and just became the chief up there. We could have hired one of these guys right out, one of these battalion chiefs or captains from Yuba City Fire that's getting ready to retire. They'd come over and be your fire chief. It's just like crazy. But you're on such an ego trip, you got to go through all this baloney. It's like that money right there, we just blew $36,000. They voted Tuesday night to spend $36,400 that the average duck, you could probably get a homeless person down there living in Camp Thorntree to figure this out. Honestly, people, it's like I don't know whether there's a spirit of stupid on this city or throughout the state of California, but to spend that kind of money when you begged and when we got potholes, we got broken stuff, we got another whole story that we could spend 45 minutes on is this crazy baseball park at the corner of 14th and B that doesn't even bring any money into the city. It costs us money to allow somebody to play baseball there. If that isn't stupid, if that doesn't say something about why the city is involved in running a baseball operation when it's being run by a private operator, but we have to fund the entire facility. Drive around, get out, get in your car. Go get some Temple coffee over at the Sunflower at Sutter Street in Yuba City and drive around that B and 14, look at that baseball field falling apart. And yet we got money to spend $36,000 between a one-day seminar. It's amazing. $12,000? I mean, what's that guy going to do? Is he going to fix the brains of these city council people? These city council people are going to walk out of that retreat with a 3-ring binder and be the same people that walked into that retreat. You've been having a retreat every single year, hadn't been costing you anything. You're telling me, they said if we just passed a 1% sales tax, it was going to change the world. There's no changes in the city of Marysville. We got new police cars, but they went out and borrowed more money. We could have borrowed that money anyway. It's like totally crazy, unbelievably crazy. Well, let's see. I'm going to quit on that because I'm going to have a heart attack here at the end of this microphone, and I'm just trying to think where to land the plane here today. You know something that's going on? I'm just going to give you a teaser. The city or the county of San Diego is having a meltdown with teaching Islam in the public school system. Did you know that? Did you know that they're teaching your kids about Islam? And I've been reading the curriculum for the Yuba City Unified School District. I'm not quite done. I read through what the kids get, but I haven't read through what the teachers get. And it's like a comparative religions thing, but they didn't give me the book. They gave me photocopies of the Islam part, but they didn't give me the part that teaches about the other religions. So San Diego School District is going after, there's a bunch of people in the San Diego area that are going after the school district because they're hooked up with a Muslim organization called CAIR, C-A-I-R. And CAIR is spoon-feeding propaganda into the school system and basically indoctrinating kids about the whole Muslim thing. And you know what they never talk about? And they're not talking about in the Yuba City Unified. They're not talking about Sharia law and repressing women. They're not talking about terrorism, that all these terrorist acts are being done by Muslims. They're not talking about vaginal mutilation that they do to girls. They're not talking about honor killings. They just leave all that out conveniently, right? They just cherry pick. It's like going to the buffet, the religious buffet, and picking out all the nice stuff. Now, I just saw where some Muslim organization donated some money to the Cascade fire victims. So that's what they get publicity for. But you heard anything about the Fort Hood shooter anymore? Nadal, remember him? He's a psychiatrist that they kept ignoring. Nobody wanted to deal with him. It's just like, under the Obama administration, everybody just ignored everything about Islam or about if they didn't want to put more people in prison, they just simply didn't arrest people anymore. They quit arresting people. That guy that just shot all those kids down in Florida, that guy had come to the surface not once, not twice, but like 50, 60 times, that kid. He needed help. He needed arrested. He needed to be put in a program. He needed medication. He needed deliverance. He probably had demons. But nobody addressed it because they just thought, well, we don't want to, if we add him to the statistics of the arrested, that looks bad, right? More people in prison. So we'll just leave him out there to roam around and not really address the thing, right? Same way we're doing with the homeless thing. Don't address it. Just allow the general public, the guy that works at Walmart, to get sick of hepatitis because he touched the hand cart after all these gnarly folks were in there. He's the cart guy. He has to go pick up all the carts. Man, if I was the guy to pick up all those carts that are strung out over the parking lot, I'd just be spraying myself with disinfectant all the time, man. The guy's probably got every disease, tuberculosis, hepatitis C, every kind of gnarly streptococcus thing. You kidding me? Like, honestly, people, here's what these people will do at the county level. When I'm going to call the county this week and find out how many cases we got going on of these tuberculosis. They won't even talk to you about HIV and all that kind of. They say, oh, we can't divulge that. We can't talk about that. Who's got HIV and how you might catch it and stuff. But I'm going to find out because here's what they'll say. Well, we have no, it's just a bad problem, and here's what we need. We need more of your tax dollars to fight it. That's what we need. Instead of prevention, like, no, we don't want to talk about more moms and dads in the household to prevent shooters, to have a more healthy children. We're just let them go crazy. Then we spend more money and hire more mental health people and put people on psychotropic drugs. That's how we're going to solve all these problems. Once they're all screwed up, once we did all the wrong things, right? That's how we're going to solve them. It's just like this week over in Yuba City, they were training firefighters on hazardous waste. And I thought, oh, that meant hazardous waste. That's when a truck spills and they dump chlorine out into a ditch. You know what the hazardous waste was? They were cooking meth over there, and they were doing honey oil extractions out of marijuana to help firefighters not kill themselves coming in when they discover a lab. And they got to go in and do the cleanup, and they got to pick up all the stuff. And they got to go in there and fight a fire when the thing catches on fire because there's all kinds of butane and stuff in there. So they were practicing, because I went in to do the tip training, and we were using the same room, and I ran into the teacher, and I said, oh, what's that tube on this tripod? He said, that's a honey oil extractor. I thought he was putting me on. I said, because I thought it was a hazmat, like oil and chemicals and gnarly stuff. He said, oh, they probably did that too, but he said, oh, no, he said, we cooked some meth in here today. I thought, oh, you guys, I said, I'm going to wipe down the tables good. My whole class I'm going to have tonight are all going to get higher than a kite in here, touching their mouth after they touch the table. They were making honey oil out of marijuana, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know, it'd be nice if we prevented the stuff instead of waiting until the whole society goes to hell in a handbasket and then we just do a cleanup. So anyway, all right. So go check out the Tea Party Patriot meeting. And if you want to try some good coffee, go over to Sunflower this week and buy some of that Temple coffee. By the way, I like to eat over there. They got a good deli over there as well. And let's see, the final thing is, if you got somebody messing with your property, call Universal Security. And they're located in Yuba Sutter counties. They're up in Butte County. They're all the way up into the Shasta area up in Redding. So that's it for today. And we're going to land the plane here and do something good for somebody this week, because you never know. I always wonder because sometimes I notice somebody, I think, man, that person acts like an angel. And the Bible says sometimes you need to pay attention to who you're hanging around and be kind to people, because they may be an angel and you didn't even know it. All right.
One.